Hello, everyone. It's always refreshing to be able to come together here out of the craziness of the world and refresh our minds and reset our hearts on our goals as Christians, whether it's your personal goals or your just overall general Christ-following goals, whether it's to better yourself personally or at a group capacity. There's times and there's seasons and there's things that we sometimes dread. You know, I like summertime because the summers here are pretty much the mildest summers I've experienced in all the places I've lived. Everywhere else I've lived, it was either not so hot but really humid, or not so humid but really hot. And but we often find ourselves having peace in between the storms of whether it's seasons or it's work. You know, you always notice there's times where work seems to ramp up and you get overwhelmed and you get just kind of frustrated with just the everyday necessities and just like, man, I can't catch a break this week. And then there's times like right now. You know what season it is right now, or what's quickly encroaching on us? Tax season. I hate taxes. Despise taxes. I know Bryan, he understands the pain of taxes. I've been getting 1099s in the mail from all of my customers when I had my little handyman business, and I'm loving that of all sorts. But but we're taxed. And in this country, you know, it's crazy that we take a paycheck and we get taxed on our paycheck, and then we go and pay our bills, and then we get taxed for paying our bills, and then we go and buy food, and we're taxed on the food, on the money that we use that's already been taxed to buy the food that's also being taxed, and then we go and we pay our mortgages or our rent on money that's already been taxed, and we get taxed for that too. And everything's just constantly be kind of, you know, just little bites of it. And it's not a lot usually. It's usually a little bit at a time, but a little bit at a time, it all kind of gets chipped away. And oftentimes, I find myself in the craziest of this world, whether it's, you know, I'm dealing with taxes, or, you know, if the weather's terrible, or I just get overwhelmed with work, that my time for God slowly gets chipped away like taxes. And don't get me wrong, there's a time for everything. If you would turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, we're going to read a majority of this chapter, because there's an answer for that. And because you think to yourself, well, when should I have time for God? When do I have time? When do I put in time for whatever? And there's a whole chapter, or a majority of a chapter, dedicated to what things we should be making time for. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1, it says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to gain and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. What profit has the worker for that in which he labors?" There's something that I read in an article not so long ago, and as you think about it in our lives, as more of God's time gets kind of taxed out of our lives, whether it's of our own doing or because of the necessities of life, we find ourselves doing this thing where we kind of like to ride on the fence of being godly and being part of the world. And I read this article the other day, and it was kind of a figurative language deal where There's a guy sitting on the fence, and God's on one side, and the devil's on the other side. And they both walk up and said, well, you should come over here. And the man says, well, I haven't decided yet. So God goes away, and the devil goes away. And later, the devil comes back and says, what you doing up on the fence? He's like, oh, I still haven't decided. He's like, no, yes, you have. I own the fence too. If we spend all of our time letting our time for God be taxed away, and we think that we're in this limbo where later down the road I'll devote more time for God. It's not right now. I'm too busy. I got too much going on with life. I got a wife, a kids, a mortgage, whatever excuse you can bring up. And you tell yourself, well, I'll just kind of ride the fence right now, and I'll give more time to God later. You've already made your choice. Because the devil owns the fence too. We're either with God or we're not. And the craziness that's going on in the world and in Israel and every other country, whatever nonsense the news is throwing out right now, and whatever new taxes they're going to bring on us in the coming years, or whoever gets elected, or whatever happens, we can use all of these crazy things that happen in life as an excuse to let it tax some more of our God time. And before we know it, we're just like the world, doing this song and dance that we do every day, every week. We come to church on Sunday, and that's when we devote our time to God. And we come to Bible study on Wednesday, and that's when we devote our time to God. And then the rest of it, we just kind of go on autopilot and kind of ride the fence for a little while longer. And then on Sunday, we lean a little bit more towards God. Something that was bothering me, because I caught myself doing it the other day, thinking, I don't have time to read my Bible tonight. I got taxes to do. And that's what brought all this on. As I was doing my taxes, I don't have time to read my Bible. You know what? The taxes didn't seem so big a deal after I read my Bible. I felt a lot better. It made me feel pretty good after I read my Bible. I was like, those taxes won't bother me in heaven. So as we conclude all the thoughts that Glenn's brought to us this morning, and I like the things he was talking about how we define righteousness and good. And at the end of the day, we need to be doing what is good. Since the very beginning, God said, when He created the earth, He said it was good. And when He wrote the book of Revelation, and not so many words, and I'm paraphrasing, He said, this is all you need to be successful, and it's good. You don't add to it, you don't take away from it. Everything you need to know is right here. And it was good. Sometimes I think we get so worked up about the things around the world, we forget to do what's good and pleasing to God, and that's to give Him our time, not just our hearts, not just our minds, but you can tell what's most important to a person by how much time they spend dwelling on it and really surrounding their life with it. So those were the thoughts I had tonight. If there's anyone here that realizes that their time with God's been taxed away from them, or if someone here is struggling with a particular sin, whatever your need may be this evening, we ask you to come to the front as we stand and as we sing.